are going to begin. My name is Boyd Matheson. I'm Senator Lee's Chief of Staff, and we want to welcome all of you to the second annual Solutions Summit. We're very excited to have all of you here today, and we're looking forward to a fantastic morning this morning, talking about things that matter, and hopefully giving you some ideas and some concepts that you can use in your businesses, and those of you who are involved in civic areas, a chance for some real great collaboration and idea sharing as we move forward. As we start today, I want to begin by thanking our partners for the Idea Factory for the Solution Summit. The Salt Lake Chamber is, again, our partner this year. We're very grateful to Lane Beatty and his crew for all they do to tag team with Senator Lee on this event. Also, the Utah Manufacturers Association, we're very grateful to them for their support, and also the Utah Technology Council. And we'll be hearing from each of our partners here with Senator Lee in just a little bit. Also want to thank our sponsors for today. They include Zions Bank, Merit Medical, the Associated Builders and Contractors, 1-800-CONTACTS, Micron, CenturyLink, Utah Credit Union Association, Rocky Mountain Power, and Rio Tinto. And so we thank each of them for being part of our sponsors and part of the Idea Factory here for 2015. We're very grateful to them. And everybody, if you could please give them a round of applause. We also want to thank the Larry H. Miller Group and the Utah Jazz, Gail Miller, Steve Starks, Tiffany Watkins, among many of their group for this wonderful facility today. The Jazz are warming up and getting ready for what will hopefully be a great season for them. So we really appreciate them providing the facility today and helping us there. You've already experienced the Waffle Love food truck food, but that's just the warm-up for today. When we conclude at noon, we'll actually go outside, and we've got some more food trucks rolling in. So I hope none of you came here really committed to keeping your diet today, because it's not going to happen. So we have the Waffle Love food truck. We also have Chop City, Genki, Licked, and Rolling Mountain Bistro. So you can just let those thoughts ruminate in your head as we're going through the day this morning. So this concept of the Idea Factory is something that Senator Lee has been working on over the last several years as he has moved out his conservative reform agenda across the country. And it's an interesting concept in terms of how we create bigger ideas and how we really move things forward in a significant way. Senator Lee has rapidly become known back in Washington as the policy entrepreneur. It's interesting, in many of the leadership meetings, whenever an issue comes up, someone will say, well, does anyone have a bill or some legislation on that? And the answer is always, I am sure Senator Mike Lee has a bill on that. And so it's become this place to foster ideas, to create dialogue. It's been great for our office here in Utah and back in D.C. to host many of you and to have you participate in that Idea Factory. And whether it's on transportation or immigration or health care, to get your ideas and your insights. Senator Lee loves the dialogue. The philosophy in our office is the solution to any problem begins when somebody says, let's talk about it. And that's really what we're here to do today. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers and people who can share some really interesting ideas. We're very grateful to have Senator Ben Sasse with us from Nebraska today. You'll get to know him a little bit. Interesting with Senator Sasse, Senator Lee actually pulled off a pretty interesting coup that I don't know has ever been done in Washington. Back in early 2014, when Senator Sasse jumped into the Senate race in Nebraska, there were a number of challengers, other candidates that were in. And some of the big D.C. groups had already picked a horse and had done endorsements. And Senator Lee was actually able to go to some of those folks and say, wait a minute, you need to sit down with Ben Sasse. He's the kind of idea guy and the kind of policy guy that we really need to change the way Washington works. And was actually able to get some of them to flip their endorsement, something that just doesn't happen, which is a testament both to Senator Lee's influence and also the brilliance of Senator Sasse. And so we're excited to have him here today. Former Governor Mike Leavitt will be joining us and sharing some of his unique perspective, along with Governor Herbert. We've got Rich McKeon here today. And then we're also going to have a really interesting dialogue about someone who is making the Idea Factory real. Carol Holloway from Switch Point down in St. George will share her story in terms of how they're moving people and making homelessness not just tolerable but temporary, and doing some unique alliances and some unique thinking in terms of how we help people through that transition process. You've got in your packet today a copy of the National Journal, which did an interesting story on Senator Lee. Of course, many of his friends in the Senate are currently running for president, and that creates some very interesting dynamics when you have three of your best friends in the Senate out there running for president. And the basis of the article is this whole Idea Factory, that while some of his colleagues are out there doing some very national things, Senator Lee is very quietly going around building alliances, getting allies across the spectrum. You'll see that today, from issues that are neither left nor right, but simply American, where Senator Lee has been able to really develop some allies and create some real opportunities for change and for moving things forward in a positive way. So I encourage you to take a good look at that today, because really what we're looking at today is how do we take big ideas and how do we move them forward? Because just to have a big idea is not enough. You all deal with that every day, and we all do. You can have a big idea in the shower, you can have a big idea in the boardroom, but unless you're able to develop the alliances and the allies to actually move it forward, it really doesn't matter. The poet T.E. Williams said that all of us dream, but not equally. Some dream in the dusty recesses of their mind and awake to find it was vanity. But dreamers of the day are dangerous, that they may act their dreams with eyes open and make them a reality. And so I hope as you go through the day today that you're keeping a couple of questions in mind. One, how does this apply to you? How does it apply to your business, to your job, to your role in this wonderful community of Utah? And number two, what are you going to do about it? What action will you take? Because this group that we've assembled here today really are the dreamers of the day for Utah and the best hope for the country. And so we're excited to have you here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Senator Lee, who will give some opening remarks and really be the moderator and facilitator. I told him he needed to be a combination of the Muppets Guy Smiley and Phil Donahue. So we're very grateful again to have everyone here today. So please help me to welcome your senator, Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you very much, Boyd. I've never practiced being a Muppet, but if I have to be Guy Smiley, I will. But Phil Donahue, I'm more comfortable with that. This has been an interesting few weeks in Washington. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Pope visit us, and it was a great visit. He addressed the joint session of Congress. It's one of the advantages of having a sovereign entity that is part of the Catholic Church is that he can be received by Congress as a foreign head of state and address a joint session of Congress. And shortly after the Pope came to visit, we had a lot of changes in Washington. Just the day after he left, Speaker Boehner announced that he'd be resigning from office. And so we've had a lot of changes ever since then. So we will always remember the fall of 2015 as the season of Pope and change. Not a very good joke, but you know, it's best I could do at this early hour. I decided to convene this conference because I believe that America is at its best whenever we're the country of big ideas. And we are, after all, a country of big ideas. It's what has differentiated us from the rest of the world. And that happens when our businesses drive innovation and our elected officials help to promote bold agendas that empower those who are in business who have these big ideas. Because it's those big ideas that end up creating jobs, and it's those jobs that end up building our middle class and helping the poor get out of poverty. That's why we need to have them. And so this idea of the Idea Factory is an interesting one. I wish in many ways that it were an actual factory with test tubes and lightning bolts and Tesla coils and things like that. But the way it operates is with a lot less fanfare than that. The way it operates, at least in my office, is a lot of lengthy discussions between me and my staff and with my colleagues, and most importantly, with important business leaders like all of you, and important state and local leaders like all of you. Now, a lot of people look at Washington today and they see a lot of conflict. And there is, to be sure, an enormous amount of conflict in Washington. There is no shortage of it there. But I see that the creative disruption that all of you deal with in business every single day is finally coming to Washington. It's taken a while to migrate there, but it's finally getting there. And it's a very good thing. And if we can harness that creative disruption in a way that will benefit us all, I think we'll see that America's best days will indeed remain yet ahead. That is to say, if we can harness this by using the power of creative disruption, and if we can rely on creative collaboration rather than collusion, we're all going to benefit from it as a result. Now, there are some areas where the Idea Factory is clearly working. We've got major overhaul proposals on, for example, education. We've got our Higher Education Reform and Opportunity Act that promises to make higher education more affordable and more accessible for all Americans and deliver more of what they need, thus helping to help the poor get out of poverty and helping to expand the middle class. We've got a tax reform package that would get rid of the marriage tax penalty and the parent tax penalty, simplify the code, and here again, help the poor get out of poverty and help expand the middle class. We've got other proposals dealing with things like regulatory reform. One measure where we're trying to limit the amount of money, of regulatory compliance costs that can be imposed by the regulatory state on the American economy every year, so that we're not constantly drifting upward, where 20 years ago, the regulatory state cost the economy $300 billion a year, which was a sigh and a gasp moment 20 years ago. But now, the federal regulatory state is costing the American economy $2 trillion a year. We want to limit that, and we also want to put Congress in the driver's seat when it comes to giving those new regulations a green light, or alternatively giving them the red light, which in many cases is what we need. We've got other reforms dealing with upward mobility and with transportation, and hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss some of those later. But we have to remember that as we start these things, while the beginning of reform can be lonely, we have to start someplace. We don't have to have everyone on board. We just have to have enough. And I always look back to the example that I've described on many occasions of James Madison. I wrote a book that came out a few months ago. It's called Our Lost Constitution. All 12 people who have read it have really enjoyed it. And I tell, among others, I tell the story of how James Madison showed up to Philadelphia in the spring of 1787. And he was the only one. And he waited. He waited for weeks for others to show up. He waited for weeks until they eventually had a quorum so that they could start the business. He didn't know when he showed up whether others would show up. He simply knew that he had to start it, and if he didn't start it, there was a good chance no one would. And so we follow that example from time to time. One example of where I've started out not knowing whether I would be alone is in the area of criminal justice reform. When I came to Washington, I came with a certain set of experiences in my own professional background that caused me to know that there were certain things that I wanted to reform. Criminal justice was one of those areas. I had served as a federal prosecutor and assistant U.S. attorney here in Utah. And back in 2003 or 2004, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I started seeing a problem. Some of our judges were complaining about the use of minimum mandatory penalties by Congress. Their complaint was not that all minimum mandatories are bad, because they're not. Their complaint was that in some cases, the minimum mandatory penalties, as they've been written by Congress, impose manifestly unjust penalties. One really nasty example of this came with a young man named Weldon Angelos. Weldon Angelos was a man mid-20s, the father of two young children, and he made some serious mistakes. He decided to sell marijuana on 3 different occasions over a 72-hour period. Now, he sold marijuana in fairly small, fairly modest quantities, but he sold marijuana nonetheless, and he had a gun on his person at the time. And unbeknownst to him, he was selling to a confidential informant. So he was indicted for these 3 modest marijuana sales. And the way the federal sentencing laws were written, and are written to this day, resulted in an interesting sentence. They produced a 55-year minimum mandatory penalty, such that Weldon Angelos is now in prison and is scheduled to remain in prison if he serves his entire sentence until he's about 80 years old. All of this because he sold marijuana in relatively modest quantities over a 72-hour period on 3 occasions. Now, the judge, then District Judge Paul Cassell, now Professor Paul Cassell, issued a lengthy opinion explaining how he didn't want to impose this particular sentence. This particular sentence was plainly excessive in relation to the crime being committed. But, Judge Cassell pointed out, there was absolutely no way the judge could avoid imposing this particular penalty. The law tied his hands. The law gave him no other option. And he said, Congress has to do something about this. Congress is the only entity that can solve this problem. And that's why when I got to Washington, I knew this was one of the issues I wanted to tackle. I started developing ideas. Eventually, I found an ally in my friend Dick Durbin, who serves with me on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, Dick Durbin is a liberal Democrat, and I'm not. But he shared my enthusiasm for this project. And over the next couple of years, we drafted out some proposals. We eventually came up with one that we felt good about it, and we introduced it. We didn't know whether we'd be all alone right at first, and right at first we were all alone. But after 2.5 years of work, mostly behind the scenes, we were able to negotiate a compromise. Now, a lot of the convincing on this idea had to be done with my Republican colleagues. This is one area where Democrats have been much more supportive than Republicans. But over the course of a couple of years, we were able to put together a broad-based bipartisan coalition, and we've got legislation that is supported by President Obama and is supported by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and many others. And we're going to have a hearing on that next week, and then the following week, a markup, and it should be getting to the floor and passing on the floor of the Senate sometime in the next month or 2. So this is an example of what we can find. If you start with one kernel of an idea, even if you don't know who your allies are going to be, if you develop the idea, you get behind it, you get momentum to it, eventually you can get legislation that can pass. And sure, there are a lot of areas where the parties are at odds with each other, but there are a whole lot of other areas where they're not. And you never are going to know where the areas are where you might agree unless you start out with one of these ideas and start pushing it. So my hope today is that we will walk away from today's summit with a better view of our own idea factory. Some strategies for finding allies, perhaps in unusual, unexpected areas, and where we can engage in the kind of dialogue between business and civic leaders that'll continue to make Utah a special place and America an extraordinary success, the greatest civilization and the strongest economy the world has ever known. So I thank you for being here. And with that, I'd like to bring to the stage 3 of our partners in the Idea Factory. Lane Beatty from the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, Todd Bingham from the Utah Manufacturers Association, and Chet Linton from the Utah Technology Council. Why don't you all 3 come up here and join me up on these stools. Give them a round of applause as they're coming up.